Hey guys, welcome to Pocket Saga. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Ash reunites with his Alolan family, part 1. This story is Ash's Alolan family surprise by the respected author Maddie Bunny 10. Make sure to show some love for their work. Before starting, if you are interested in Pokemon fanfictions, you can consider subscribing this channel and like this video, that keeps me motivated to upload more. Now let's dive in. Here's a short summary. Ash heads home from the Galar region after making the semifinals. Little did he know, he would get a huge surprise from his Alolan family. Plus, some of his past Pokemon will show up as well, and a potential love interest. Now let's get to the story. Currently on a flight to the Kanto region, in particular Pallet Town, Professors Kukui and Burnett, along with their son Lei and Samson Oak, were getting ready to see Professor Samuel Oak for a special get-together. Lei, Kukui and Burnett's first son, was admiring the view on his mother's lap, as it was his first trip outside of the islands. Burnett, carefully holding onto her son, was counting down the minutes in her head before arriving to meet up with Delia and Samuel at the airport. For her, it's her first trip to visit her Alolan son Ash in Pallet Town. Though she and Ash aren't related, she sees him as her son, even calling Ash Lei's big brother. But it's hard for her not have Ash for a longer time, considering the first time, she was in tears when Ash had to go. It wasn't as bad as the second time, when he returned for a couple of days. Again, she wished for him to stay longer. She wished she would just tell him directly about being her guardian, his second mother. Something she kept replaying over and over in her mind. As she was in that loop, she was poked by Kukui, who noticed that. "Look, honey, it's okay. We'll be landing soon, then we'll be in contact with Delia. Trust me, things will work out." Burnett nodded, but knew Kukui had a good poker face. He too was hiding the same regret she's experiencing, maybe not showing it out in public, but more of a mental battle. Samson noticed the two, in particular Kukui, knowing the headstrong professor can act cool and calm under pressure. But when he finally lets down his guard, as he could remember as it were yesterday. 2 days ago, at Orangaru's cafe, Samuel would see Kukui, depressed, not even taking a sip of his citrus berry drink. Something was eating at him, and he knew this was the perfect place to chat. "Kukui, my boy, why so blue? You look like a sad Eevee." Making the imitation of an sad Eevee, but Kukui didn't say or do anything. "Kukui, it's near the holiday break, time for merriment and some extended time with your family." When Samuel said family, Kukui broke down and started to cry. "Family? How can that be when my kid is out miles and miles away? I just wish that I could say that I want you to stay with me, my wife, and your little brother. Why did I froze in that moment? Why can't I say that I love you like a father to his son? Now I know how Guzma felt." Samuel nodded, as he could put 2 and 2 together. Kids will leave the nest and learn to fly like Pidgeys. Once again imitating a Pidgey. The fact he came back to see you, Burnett and Lei, means that he sees you as family. Though never in blood, you guys are all connected. As Samuel would console Kukui, Orangaru would come over to hug Kukui, and it was a gently hug, despite being an orangutan. "Thank you, Orangaru." Kukui smiled, and would soon hug Samuel. "Thank you, my friend." Kukui would wipe a tear, before composing himself, finally getting that monkey off his back. As he would start to take a sip of his drink, still one problem remains. "How do I tell Ash, Delia, about what I'm proposing?" Kukui was scratching his head, trying to come up with something to propose. Orangaru pointed his finger to Kukui's heart as he smiled, pretty much telling Kukui, "Speak from your heart." "Me? Just say what I said?" Kukui would have to take that to heart, no pun intended, as he felt a bit of relief. But still nervous about the process. An hour to go, before arriving at the Kanto region. Burnett was holding her sleeping son, as she noticed Samson and Kukui asleep as well. She couldn't sleep, just replaying the moment she finally broke down and confessed to someone. "Wick, Faba, are they here?" 2 days prior, she had heard word that Lusamine had found her husband at the Orange Islands. A weird phenomenal shift caused the Ultra Wormhole to appear. In Valencia Island, Professor Ivy found a strange man, covered in a black goo. Once identified, Ivy would contact Ether Foundation, and that's how Lusamine and her kids would confirm that it was Mon, and safely return him to Alola. Burnett would see Lusamine outside of the ICU, as she would see her husband in a respirator, breathing okay, but still unknown of the lingering effects for being in the wormhole for such a long time. Gladian and Lily are asleep in their rooms. Wick nodded, as Faba could only watch from a distance. Mon was his friend, but was afraid he might not be the same person when he wakes up. Burnett came over to buy her. "I'm glad you found him." All she could do was cry. As Lusamine returned the big and smiled, "I'll wait each day until he wakes up. Even if it kills me." Lusamine was determined, but was pulled to the side, as she saw a food bag, and heard her stomach growl. Maybe a break would be good. She chuckled at herself, but felt something odd about Burnett. She wasn't herself, and that bothered her. When the two arrived at her office, Lusamine, like a munchlax, would eat as if she haven't eaten in days. In fact, 3 days since her husband returned. Burnett blinked in shock by that, but chuckled. "Lusa, you'll make my munchlax jealous if he saw you like that." A rare smile for Burnett at that time, but Lusamine knew better, and once she had her fill of good curry and rice, she sighed, and looked straight into Burnett's eyes. "Burnett, what's wrong? For some reason, you are not who you are. Even Wick and Faba noticed a slight change in your behavior in the past days." She sighed, rubbing Burnett's cheeks gently. "I know that you are a talented professor, and great researcher, and a wonderful mother." When Lusamine said mother, Burnett snapped and slapped her face. "No, I'm not." Even Burnett, by her own self, leapt back out of shock from her out-of-nature behavior. But recompose herself and lashed out. What kind of mother would cower to her own child? What kind of mother would watch her son leave off, without a care in the world? What kind of mother can't even say that you love him with all of your heart and soul? After that moment, she got on her knees and started to cry. Clearly this had been eating at her for months, in this case over a year. Lusamine heard that exchange, and knew what Burnett was referring to. Though that slap was unnecessary, considering how she was always busy and not spending more time with Gladian and Lily, she could understand clearly who Burnett was missing. "So, you miss your Alolan son? The one that truly brings you joy?" She came over to Burnett, wiped her tears, and hugged her. "You are a wonderful person, a terrific professor, wife, and mother to both of your kids." That exchange made Lusamine cry, as she pounded her fist gently onto Burnett's back. "I hate to say this, but I envied you. I almost hated you since you married Kukui." Burnett's eyes widened, as she got up in complete shock. "You hated me? Why?" Burnett couldn't believe that, considering Lusamine was her best friend of many years. Lusamine got up and looked at Burnett, and sighed. "When you and Kukui got married, and noticed how you, him, and Ash were as tight as a unit, I cursed at the world for taking my family away from me. I know it was wrong, but..." She was shaking her fist, and wanted to lash out of anger, but couldn't. "I wanted to know why she could have a family, and take mine's away." Lusamine broke down again, but soon got a hug from Burnett, who understood her completely, considering all of years, working for her. "It's okay, at least now, we can both move forward." Burnett tried to act confident, but got a gently slap from Lusamine. "No. You have to tell Ash how you truly feel about your situation. How you want to be more than just a good friend, but as a guardian to him, as a mother to son. Speak from your heart, and I'm sure he'll understand." Lusamine smiled and chuckled. "Who knows, maybe I can set up a playdate with Lily." Burnett chuckled, as that got her out of that funk. "I'm not so sure he's the dating type. Though he and Kukui are so alike, it's maybe possible." Burnett and Lusamine smiled and hugged, but had no clue Wick and Faba heard and saw the entire moment, and those two cried for joy as well. Back on the plane, Burnett looked outside her window, and she had a smile on her face, knowing that she had to be that Burnett, to tell Ash how she truly feels about him, as his potential mother. But that would be for another time. She would finally fall asleep, still holding on to Lei, her second son. An hour or two later, the plane would arrive at Kanto Airport, as Kukui, Burnett, Lei, and Samson would get off the plane, and there immediately would see Mr. Mime, Professor Samuel Oak, Samson's cousin, and Delia Ketchum, Ash's mother, waving to them, as they are thankful they arrived safely. "Samson, my friend, it's a rare treat to see you out here in Kanto for the holidays." The two cousins would give out a big hug, as Samson grinned. "Seeing you, my friend, makes me grin like an oddish." "Yep," He mimicked an oddish. To be here for the holidays will be a chingling, mimicked the chingling. Samuel chuckled, seeing his cousin's imitations, as he noticed Kukui and Burnett with a new addition. And you must be Lay, right? Kukui nodded, as he was next to his beloved Burnett, who was holding their son. Delia smiled as she came over to look at the new baby. Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime. Mr. Mime noticed the increasing clouds, which worried him. Delia would agree with her Pokemon friend. I hate to spoil the moment, but it looks like dreadful weather ahead. That worried Delia, considering that Ash will arrive tomorrow from the Galar region. The last thing she wanted is to have her son stranded in a snowstorm, but the weather forecast for just clouds and cold weather. Samuel would lead the group out. All right, no time like the present and in haiku about family. Christmas home with songs gathered family rejoice. Happy stars smiling, everyone would be in good spirits from Professor Oak's famous haiku, as they would head out for what would be an interesting holiday adventure. Once the party arrives at Samuel Oak's laboratory in Pallet Town, Samuel and Samson noticed a bit more than just luggage from Kukui and Burnett. In fact, looks like a bunch of presents with a cooler. Is this for one person or a Pika Pika, imitating a Pikachu, party? Samson chuckled, carrying some of the wrapped goods. I think we went a bit overboard. Kukui nodded, as Burnett chimed in. Don't worry professors, only a few presents, and some Alolan pancakes in the cooler. Everyone nodded, though Delia smirked. I'm curious, why so many presents for my Ashi? And why would you two make your way all the way from Alola to the Kanto region? Burnett and Kukui knew Delia was sharp as a tack, but man, what a time to be put on the spot. Despite Samson knowing the truth, all will be revealed shortly, we promise, we won't hold anything back. Kukui responded, which got an approval from Delia. Burnett sighed for that moment, knowing this will be difficult to explain. As everyone entered the laboratory, a familiar Pokemon would get on top of Samuel, showing its appreciation, muck muck muck. Everyone chuckled, seeing Samuel smothered by a muck, Ash's muck in fact. Oh muck, oh what I'll do with you. Samson chuckled, but soon got smothered by muck, thinking Samson as Samuel. Muck muck muck. Samuel laughed, as for once he wasn't smothered by an eager muck. As Kukui and Burnett looked on from a distance, Lay chuckled, seeing a Pokemon hug like that. At least Muck is a friendly type. Kukui responded, as they unloaded the stuff inside, as Burnett was at awe from the laboratory. Wow, I heard from Kukui it's a magnificent LSB oratory, but this is beyond words. Samuel smiled, and responded, it's quite, though it harbors many of the Pokemon from many trainers. Of course some of Ash's Pokemon is here. As Samuel would show Burnett around, Delia would take Kukui to the kitchen, as she couldn't help but something felt off. Yes, it was a nice surprise to see him and Burnett, along with their new baby, but still a bit off she wasn't contacted earlier about it. Be honest with me, I know you and Burnett are good people. I just want to know what's going on. Is Ash okay? Delia was only concerned, considering that she got a call from Ash from Alola the last time he went there. Your son is doing well. Last time he came to see us, he and Go wanted to check out the Alola region, but stopped by to visit me and Burnett. Even his Pokemon were eager to see him again. Kukui smiled, as Delia breathed a sigh of relief at that. I just worry about him, I'm his mother, but he travels so often, it's hard to pin him down in one spot. But for him to return to Alola, that was a bit of a change. Kukui nodded, but was intrigued by that statement. What do you mean a bit of a change? Delia replied, usually he heads to one region and competes in a league. Then he would return here, never thought he would during his journey to go to another region he visited before. In this case to see you and Burnett. Delia wasn't mad about that, but considering how she had Ash figured out, that threw her for a loop. To be honest, I never expected him to return so soon either. But when I saw him at the airport, he was almost tearing up at that point. It made me happy to see his positive, upbeat attitude once again. He didn't say it then, but Delia had the gist of what he was trying to say. As she was about to continue, Burnett saw Kukui, and pulled him aside to see the Tauros. Wait hun. Those Pokemon can be quite dangerous, especially when you're carrying our son. That fell on deaf's ears as they left the area. Delia sighed, pulling out her wallet, and looking at a picture of a man and woman. Just the look into his eyes wanted to make her blood boil. "I'll tell them tonight." She nodded, looking around for her favorite spot on the compound. Hours after checking up on the Pokémon, decorating the living room for a nice Christmas bash, and having a nice dinner, Kukui and Burnett would head to the couch, as they just placed their son in the crib for his rest. Delia would sit across them, as she wanted to have this talk. There was a brief awkward silence, as the three had something on their minds, but was trying to figure out who would speak first. "Delia, I have to ask, I wished I had before the last time." He was sweating a bit. To say he wasn't nervous would be an understatement. "I'm wondering, do you have a boyfriend, husband? Neither you or Ash has mentioned of him." Delia stood up and turned around, shaking, but took a deep breath and sits back down. "I used to have one, but he's no longer in the picture." Kukui and Burnett sighed, as they didn't want to open old wounds. "Don't be sad about it. It took me a while to get over being dumped like that." She would show him a picture of her now ex and a blonde bombshell. "But why keep a picture like that, if he's the one that hurt you like that?" Kukui replied. "I agree, you're a wonderful woman, Delia. You don't need that guy to run your life like that." Burnett chimed in, not wanting Delia to feel hurt. "I appreciate your comments, but at that time, I felt lost, all alone, used. At one point, I wanted to end my life, because I had so many dreams at that time. A model, a gym leader, and coordinator, all put on hold for my son and husband. When my husband left, I felt everything I'd done in life was for nothing." Kukui and Burnett had no idea. They see Delia as a beacon of sunlight and optimism. Never someone to be depressed and suicidal. However, she took a deep breath, before smiling. "When I look into Ash, I see hope. I see that I can do what I can as a mother, and give him what he wanted, a caring parent, and someone to be there, when things go wrong." She grinned, seeing Burnett and Kukui wipe a tear. "I do worry from time to time, but I know he can take care of himself, and he's just a joy that people flock to him." Burnett and Kukui had a feeling Delia saw right through their visit, but didn't expect it to be this quickly. "I guess us arriving here you knew as well?" Delia smiled, but shook her head no. "If that's the case, then how did you know?" Kukui now was scratching his head, as he knew he told only Samson, and knew Burnett told only Lusamine. Delia chuckled as she pointed to Burnett. It was at the exhibition match, just a day after the Alolan League, between Kukui and Ash. Delia, Mr. Mime, Samuel Oak, and Burnett was watching the intense battle. An eager and excited Burnett couldn't contain herself, describing the moment, where she kinda made an awkward, but loving statement. "It was at the exhibition battle. It's a dream to see my husband and son compete in the biggest stage of them all." Burnett didn't notice at the time Delia made a slight glare at her, but shook it off. Burnett smiled, face palming herself, as Kukui couldn't believe that. "Honey, you said that," Burnett replied, while twiddling her thumbs. "I couldn't help it. Seeing the two of you battling, it was a father-son moment. Plus the classmates knew you two were two peas in a pod." She chuckled, watching Kukui squirm. "But we were supposed to." Before Kukui could continue, he would receive an hug from Delia. "You two were so caring and sweet to my Ash, and I had a feeling that I could see you two as legal guardians to my Ashie." Burnett started to weep, as she couldn't help but to hug Delia. "You have no idea what this means for us." She kept hugging Delia, but had to ease off, not wanting to suffocate her. "The first time when Ash was leaving, I was crying buckets. I didn't want him to go. It felt I was losing my son. But when he came back, it put me at ease, knowing he hasn't forgotten about us." Kukui would hug Burnett, as he started to cry too. "I couldn't cry that day, but wished that he would stay a little longer. I missed him so much." He was nearly at a loss for words again. "I thought I wouldn't see him again." All three would hug, as it felt like a bonding moment between family members. Delia would head over and grab an envelope with legal papers, to make Burnett and Kukui legal guardians for Ash. "I think this is the part to make this official," she smiled, as she saw the two head over to sign the papers. It made her heart fill with joy, knowing that at least Ash have loving parents, no matter where he goes. "Delia, Kukui, Burnett, I hate to interrupt the love fest, but someone has a stinky diaper." Samuel would hold little Lay, as Burnett and Kukui chuckled. "Duty calls," both said as they would head up to take care of their firstborn son. At least they now know they will get two. As the night settled in, and everyone would be resting, over at Kanto Airport. A bunch of restless patrons would get off the plane. Sounds like something happened, and apparently this isn't their arrival. A young tom girl, dressed in a light purple winter coat and a fuzzy lavender hat with white trim, heads off with an espion. Well, here we are, the Kanto region. I wonder where I can crash the night. At the airport, salon maiden Annabelle and her partner Espion looks a bit weary. Considering her flight got delayed by an angry customer, the last thing she wants is more drama. Though that wasn't in the cards for her. Well, better tell Lucian, her brother, and Olympia, her aunt, I'll be staying over at the Pokemon Center tonight. She sighed, but heard the latest announcement. Flight 230 from Galar region, arriving at gate 2 inches. Annabelle heard that and her eyes widened. No, it can't be. Did my aunt predicted that on the nose? She could replay the vision her aunt gave her, just as she was leaving to the airport. Annabelle, when you're traveling home, I sent someone from Galar, someone to open your heart. She chuckled, as she had something on her mind, friends forever in time, bonded by our hearts and souls, love forever lasting. Annabelle blinked, as she knew her aunt likes to go over the top. But she shook that prediction off and waved to her. Back at the airport, she looked on from a distance, but Espion's ears twitched, as she sensed someone familiar. Annabelle noticed, and was more curious. Who did you see, Espion? Espion replied, as her tail points to a young man and his Pikachu. It can't be. Ash? Annabelle blushed like a tomato berry, as her crush is at the airport. What her aunt meant was that her love was coming at the same time as her. Why is he here? And why so late? She thought to herself, but then realized he comes from Pallet Town, so he's returning home. Ever the calm and confident trainer, almost paralyzed by her true affections for him. But she thought this would be the best time to really tell him how she feels about him. She looked over at Espion and smiled. Ready, Espy, her nickname for Espion. Espion nodded, awaiting her mental command. Use Psychic on Pikachu, and bring him over to us. It was a mental move, so that no one can hear it, except for Espion. Espion's body glowed a dark purple, as it locked onto Pikachu, and soon Pikachu would be floating above Ash, and heading towards Annabelle. Ash saw his buddy in the air and moving quickly, and he rushed after him. Stop! Give back my Pikachu! Pikachu was moving about, but when he saw Espion and Annabelle, he quickly changed his tone, trying to calm Ash down. In that moment, Ash was about to take out his Pokeball to bring out Gengar, when he heard Pikachu's calm voice, and literally put on the brakes, when he would see Annabelle and Espion. Ash saw Pikachu out of that psychic move, and soon would be on Annabelle's shoulder. He was at a loss for words. Naturally he wanted to be mad at her for playing a trick like that. But he haven't seen her in a long time, and something was different about this reunion. Almost as if two lovers returned from opposite sides of the world. Annabelle. Ash couldn't say much, and neither can Annabelle. The two drew out a crowd that was fascinated by this cute reunion. Welcome home, Ash. Annabelle smiled as she went up to hug him. When Ash received the hug, it was a brief awkward moment before hugging her back, as it felt right. Something may be missing from him. A friend, lover? When they released the hug, Pikachu would leap onto Ash's shoulder, as the two are back again. Annabelle, long time no see, and why are you at the airport? Waiting for someone? Annabelle replied. Same here. Oh, my flight got delayed, and I just arrived here. She chuckled. Guess your flight got delayed too? Ash laughed. More or less, but I was just happy to stretch my legs. Annabelle smiled. Sorry for that little prank. Needed something to lighten the mood, and when you got here, she turned away, blushing again, not wanting to show her hand to him. Plus she wanted him to guess what she was feeling. I guess I got carried away. She smiled, looking into his eyes. As Ash saw her, he wanted to say something, but forgot he had to call Mom when he got off the plane. Excuse me, I gotta make a phone call. Annabelle was curious, and followed him to the nearest videophone and smiled when he was calling his mom. Hi Mom, sorry for the delay, my flight got delayed. Delia responded. Thank goodness. She breathed a sigh of relief. Though she giggled, seeing a young person next to Ash. Is he your new friend from Galar? Annabelle smirked and giggled. No ma'am. I'm Annabelle, Salon Maiden of the Battle Frontier." She couldn't resist giggling. "Like mother, like son." Delia blinked. "Like mother, like son." Ash knew he was busted. "Don't worry, Mom. I made the same mistake when I thought Annabelle was a boy." Delia chuckled, but had to keep it down, considering there were more guests. "We're heading to the Pokemon Center for the night, before heading to Professor Oak's." Annabelle heard that and couldn't believe she was offered this invite. Though trying to hide her flushed face, Delia smirked, seeing her Ashy have a potential girlfriend. Mom, is that Samson?" Delia looked over, and quickly shooed him away, as he was holding onto Lay. "Oh, he's just visiting his cousin for the holidays." Annabelle knew the feeling of an overprotected parent, sibling, and nodded. "Don't worry, Mrs. Ketchum, he'll behave, I promise." She winked at that. Ash saw that and knew that was bad. Delia had to hurry before Ash's surprise would be ruined. "All right, sweetie, have a good night, and remember to change your, you know what." Ash gagged at that, but waved to her, "Good night, Mom." Annabelle laughed and replied, "You know what?" Ash sighed but replied, "Mom meant underwear, to which I do each day." He pouted, but Annabelle found that cute to see him more out of his shell, but loved even more of his relationship with his mother. "Say, Ash, since you invited me to the Pokemon Center, shall you lead the way?" She extended her hand out for him to hold, hoping he would get the gist of her feelings. "Sure." He took her hand, to which Annabelle was mentally excited, and as they were about to head off, but realized something. Our luggage. In their excitement of a reunion, they had to rush to get their luggage, before taking a taxi to the nearest Pokemon Center. At the Pokemon Center, Nurse Joy would notice a pair of trainers coming in, and she could recognize the two immediately. "Ash, Annabelle, welcome to the Pokemon Center." Pikachu would hop off of Ash's shoulder, and would soon leap up onto Nurse Joy's shoulders and smiled. "Sorry about that, Nurse Joy, it's been a long flight with so many problems." Nurse Joy nodded. "When I received your call, I thought we were booked up, but luckily we have a spot available. Although you two will be sharing the room." Annabelle nodded and replied, "Thank you very much, Nurse Joy. I wished our flights were earlier, but can't predict two crazy incidents." Nurse Joy smiled, and would take the two, along with their Pokemon, to their room. It's a basic room with a queen-sized bed. Nothing more, but at least it's something for the night. "Now if you need anything, please let me know." Chansey appeared with a drink cart and gives everyone moo moo milk. "Thank you, Chansey." Chansey clapped, and would soon rush off. Ash and Annabelle thanked them both, and soon they were alone in the room. After a few minutes of washing up and changing into their pajamas, the two would be on the bed, as it was to them, a bit weird being in the same room let alone the same bed. Annabelle giggled, seeing Ash in his blue and lightning bolt pajamas. "Did Pikachu picked it out for you?" She couldn't help it, but Pikachu would leap onto Ash's shoulder and nuzzle him. "Mom did, but my buddy do love it." He smiled, seeing her in her lavender and white pajamas. Though he didn't see it at first, he did adore it. "Annabelle, it's been a while. What have you been up to?" Annabelle grinned, as she was about to ask him the same thing. "Well, Ashy," she smirked, seeing him pout. Hearing the word Ashy, "It's been a bit dull since our last battle. In fact, not one person made it to my area since." She sighed. Even Greta was wondering, are there any good trainers lately? Ash nodded. "So you left the Battle Frontier?" He knew she was a great trainer, and it was a shame no one made it to the 6th level of the Frontier. "I told Scott I was going to visit my Aunt Olympia at Kalos for a break and..." Ash cut her off for that realization. "Your aunt is Olympia of the Anastar Gym?" Annabelle smirked, as she leaned in to kiss his cheek. Ash blushed at that kiss, and looked at her, a bit confused. "That's for helping my aunt save Kalos from destruction." Ash was speechless for that moment, but had a smile on his face as he blinked. "How is everyone in Kalos?" She knew he would probably have questions, and thankfully her aunt had the answers. "In short, everyone is doing well, and Greninja is still our saving grace." Ash smiled, knowing his friend is still fighting the good fight. "Other than that, my brother may want to thank you when he arrives shortly." Ash blinked, now curious about meeting her brother, but had a realization. "Is he Lucian?" Annabelle gasped in shock, as she couldn't believe he could be so on point. "Don't tell anyone he's my brother." She sighed, envisioning him hugging her. He's a bit overprotected. Ash nodded and knew the feeling. I promise, although I never expected you and him to be related. The last time I saw him, me and Dawn wanted to battle him. Annabelle almost wanted to curse her aunt for being correct about her vision, but to enjoy this moment without anyone popping up is refreshing. Well, Ash, in the morning, she yawned, considering it was a long day. I hope you have a lot of good stories since we last battled. She looked over and see him lying down. A bit rude, but considering both had long flights, understandable, though she would lean in and kiss on his cheek again. Thank you for being with me. After that kiss, she would lie down to rest. She felt an arm around her. She looked over and just blushed, knowing that he was there to comfort her. Good night, Annabelle. She blushed. Good night, Ash. In the morning, after a peaceful night, Ash and Annabelle would head out of the Pokemon Center. As they looked out at the sky, and they would see a bunch of Pidgey flying about. Looks like they are have a good time. She smiled, but her Espeon and Ash's Pikachu noticed something coming in close. What's up, buddy? He saw coming in close, and shielded her, before hearing a familiar sound. Pidgeot. It can't be. He would see a large bird landing near them, and it seems to know him. Pidgeot, Pidgeot. Ash smiled, and ran up to his buddy and gave him a big Pidgeot. Long time no see. Pidgeot smiled, accepting the hug as it had been ages since the two parted ways. Annabelle saw the reunion and approached them. Hello there, Pidgeot, you two must be long-lost friends. I could tell by the warm embrace. Pidgeot cawed in delight, as he would nuzzle her, which made her laugh. Careful, I'm ticklish. Ash couldn't believe out of all days, one of his first Pokemon would return. Ash looked at him as he was just wondering how his long-lost buddy was doing. Pidgeot, how are you, and are all the Pidgey still safe? Pidgeot cawed and nodded, as the Pidgey would swoop down right in front of him. Pidgey? Annabelle saw them, and they were just adorable. She approached them and could tell they respect Pidgeot. Looks like they know who runs the roost. The Pidgey smiled as she approached Pidgeot. She would look into his eyes, to sense his feelings. You and Ash were close. But you had to protect your flock, am I right? Ash was impressed, as he didn't tell her the story of Pidgeot. Pidgeot. Pidgeot replied in excitement, nuzzling her again. Pidge. She was laughing from the nuzzling. I have a question, can we have a ride to Professor Oak's laboratory? Pidgeot lowered itself, meaning it would accept the offer. She would get on top of Pidgeot, but realized that Ash would be walking by himself. Ash, I'm sorry we both can't be on Pidgeot. She sighed for that moment, but saw him pull out a Pokeball. Don't worry, I knew this might happen. He threw his Pokeball up in the air. Dragonite, I choose you. Annabelle gasped seeing a Dragonite appear, as she had no idea he caught one. Though impressed, she was a bit jealous and wanted to know what else he has. So Mr. Ashy, any other Pokemon you have that you're hiding from me? He shook his head, hearing Ashy again, but he would smile and get on Dragonite. You'll have to find out. So Pidgeot and Dragonite would fly out, with Ash, Annabelle, Pikachu, and Espeon. Hold on. It was a sight to behold, but they seemed to forget one thing. Wait. Your luggage. Nurse Joy rushed out, but was too late, as she would see their luggage laying next to each other. She chuckled, thinking it was only one thing, puppy love. She would pick up her cell phone and call Professor Oak. Hello, Professor, she giggled, hearing him, but more of the situation. Can you possibly rush over to the Pokemon Center to pick up a couple of luggage? Samuel was a bit perplexed by this request. Who do they belong to? He would hear the names, and he smiled. Of course I will. Don't worry about a thing. Samuel couldn't believe those two would leave their stuff behind. Although, he had a feeling it was more than just puppy love from Nurse Joy. It didn't take long for Pidgeot and Dragonite to arrive at Professor Oak's laboratory. They landed by the lake, as they would take a well-deserved drink. Annabelle and Ash got off of them and hugged them and thanked them for the ride. Annabelle would move towards Dragonite, as she would look into his eyes, to sense his feelings. Oh, I see, you're an intriguing one. You never knew how to fly until Ash taught you, right? Dragonite nodded, while Ash was totally impressed by her abilities. Though now it's getting a bit scary, considering he has yet to tell about his journeys as of late. Annie, you're good, scary good, she smiled, but laughed when he called her Annie. Okay, my aunt told you her favorite name to call me? Ash chuckled at that, but shook his head. No, but she was quite good in sensing Pokemon. Maybe over the top at some spots. Annabelle nodded and replied, she can get into the visions a bit much. But is quite wise. Ash nodded, as he was scratching his head, trying to picture Annabelle in Olympia's gym uniform. Annabelle giggled, moving over in front of him. Say Ash, I want to know what have you done since our last battle. Ash smirked as he hoped she could sense what he was feeling. Though this time, it seemed he could sense what she wanted. All I could say is that he couldn't help but blush, seeing her beautiful smile. Oh, it's been a long journey. Sinnoh, Kalos, Alolan, Galar. Seems he was at a loss for words now. Annabelle poked his nose gently, wanting him to answer her long-awaited question. So Ash, can you tell what I'm feeling? Ash gulped, as he was about to give out her answer, when a certain Pokemon crashed the party. Corphish Core. Looks like Corphish found his two favorite friends, as it nuzzled up to Ash. Hey Corphish, how are you doing? Corphish smiled at him, before turning over to say hello to Annabelle. Hello my friend. Seems like you're always in good spirits. Though she had a smile on her face, she wanted to kill that little lobster for ruining that potential moment. Ash was about to answer her question, when he heard a familiar Pokemon, Bay. Bay. Ash smiled as Bayleaf would get on top of Ash and snuggle him. Annabelle laughed, as she realizes that this was going to be an ongoing theme. Considering it is Professor Oak's lab, most likely most of Ash's Pokemon would appear. Why hello Bayleaf. She couldn't help notice how affectionate his Pokemon is towards him. So are you his girlfriend? Ash slowly got up and hugged his Bayleaf, before responding. No, but does misses me from time to time. Annabelle nodded, knowing that feeling. Almost envious of that Bayleaf. Say Ash, any more friends going to pop up? Just as she said that, a yellow and orange Noctowl would land on her head, turning its head 180 degrees, before cawing. Hi Noctowl. His Noctowl would move from Annabelle to Ash's shoulder, as it turned his head again. You alright Annie? Annabelle brushed her hair a bit, was a bit surprised to have a Pokemon land on her head. Though not the first time, was a bit unexpected. Sure Ash, but had no idea your friends would show up. Ash chuckled but nodded, as he would take her hand and show her around. Eventually he would tell her about all of his journeys, including his league win in Alola. She was impressed that he did so much since the last time they faced each other. It only reaffirmed of why she had a huge crush on him. Meanwhile, Samuel Oak would arrive with the suitcases. Those two are a bit careless with their stuff. Burnett, who was helping out Delia, smiled. Don't worry, we saw a Dragonite and a Pidgeot fly over here earlier. She chuckled. Besides, I'm not going to ruin their first date. Delia nodded but chimed in. True, but we have to bring them in soon, before it gets too cold tonight in this weather. Samuel couldn't help himself but to be proud of Ash, but can't wait to show him the big surprise. An hour or so later, Ash and Annabelle would take a break under an Oran berry tree. After taking in some Oran berries, Annabelle would look at the vastness of the facility, before looking at Ash. I'm curious, if you don't mind me asking, do you have a dad? She didn't want to pry, but was curious. I know your mom sounds sweet, but just wondering if you have a dad. Ash shrugged a bit, but answered, for some reason my parents split up. Don't know why, but the last time I heard from him, he was off on an adventure. But that was long time ago. It still bugged him, that he haven't heard any word from him, but it clearly hasn't distracted him from his quest of being a Pokemon master. I'm sorry about that. My mom remarried and it's been chaotic. But my brother Lucian has been a protector of me, and my Aunt Olympia is more of a mother to me. But that hasn't deterred my passion as a trainer. Ash nodded, giving her a hug. But realized something. I do have a family, maybe not a traditional sense. I do have my mom, but I also have my Alolan family, Kukui, Burnett, and Lay. Annabelle smiled, and had heard of the Alolan family from one of his stories. So, do they miss you? Given you're traveling all the time? She was intrigued by this special family. Ash replied, they do. Especially Burnett. She was so happy to see me return to Alola when me and Gon went to visit. She called me Lay's big brother. Annabelle couldn't believe that. Big brother? She giggled at that. Well, I can see that, though it'll be hard if you two aren't in the same area. Ash pouted playfully. Well, you and Lucian aren't in the same area either. She smirked, touché. She looked at him for a moment, as she looked at the sky. You know, a family is made up of the people that love and care about each other. I'll admit I sometimes hated my brother being overprotected of me. But he cares about me, and I do love that about him. Ash nodded, looking at her, maybe sensing more about her. What do you and your family do for the holidays? She blinked, as she heard the question. It was rare for someone to ask her of her holiday traditions. Promise not to tell anyone about this. Ash nodded, as he allowed her to continue, Christmas carols, and making lots of treats. And the occasional holiday sweater exchange. She would show Ash on her cell phone, last year's party. Ash nearly chuckled, seeing her in a dearling ugly sweater. I'm sorry, but you're usually in lavender, white, and hints of gold. Just not used to seeing you in a sweater. Ash knew he was in for it, knowing Annabelle had her own ways. All right, Ashy. When we get inside I'll ask your mother if she has any pictures of you. Ash gulped, knowing Mom had about 3 photo albums of him. That look alone would only make her day. Ash realized that and would slowly get up and Pikachu would get on his shoulder. Ready, buddy? Pikachu grinned, knowing this will be a fun game. Ash looked as he would help her up, but then tags her. You're it. Annabelle took that as a challenge, and she would run after her. You're not escaping from me, Ashy. As the two would play tag, Ash was close to Professor Oak's lab. He turned around to see her not too far, but when he turned around, he runs into a brick wall. In this case, his Snorlax. A moment later, Ash would get up and felt his head spinning. He would see a concerned Pikachu and Annabelle, thankful to see him in one piece. Oh, what happened? Just as he asked, a Munchlax would kiss his cheek. Munchlax. Ash would look at a Munchlax, not noticing Annabelle giggling at that cute moment. But then realized whose Munchlax it is. Wait, you're, a familiar voice would answer Ash. Hello there, Ash. Glad to see that you're okay. Burnett would see her baby, while holding onto her other baby. Annabelle would see Ash's Alolan mom and waves. Hello Burnett and little Lay. Annabelle would see the happy mother and son, as she saw Ash in disbelief. He would walk up, before hugging her gently. Hello Burnett. It was a sight to behold, to see a mother and son reunion. But in this case, he never thought Burnett would be in Kanto, let alone in Pallet Town. Which could only means that someone else is near as well. Hey Ash, save some of those hugs for me. Delia would look over on the balcony, as she waved to her son. Ash would see his mom, as Burnett wanted to keep the warm embrace, allows Ash to go up to hug Delia. Annabelle didn't want to ruin the moment, but was approached by Burnett. So you're Ash's girlfriend, I heard a lot about you. Annabelle blushed hearing that, as she couldn't believe that love shared by apparently 2 mothers. Did Mrs. Ketchum tell you? Or you're just guessing? Burnett chuckled, seeing Annabelle blush a deep red. She didn't tell me. But I just have that motherly sixth sense, Annabelle gulped, fearing Burnett was like Olympia. But Burnett was right, she just had that motherly sense. Annabelle would approach Ash's mom, as she was curious to know herself about Ash's friend, mother. So Ash, Mrs. Ketchum, what is going on? I feel like this is a family reunion. Delia nodded, pointing to Kukui. So when is it my turn for a hug? Ash saw Kukui and went up to hug him. Like before, it wasn't a complete shock, considering Burnett and Lay was there. Though it was unexpected to see him around the holidays. What's going on? This is all so sudden. Ash nearly teared up, but felt his hair ruffled up. Oh, Samson was going to visit his cousin Samuel and me and Burnett thought why not visit you for once. Though Kukui was half right. He didn't want to ruin the big reveal shortly. He glanced over at Burnett who was about to kill him if he ruined the surprise. He would glance over at the young girl and recognized her. Annabelle, is that you? Delia has told me a lot about you. But didn't know your brother was Lucian. Annabelle felt like she was on a date, meeting the parents for the first time. She nearly hid her face, but smiled. I never knew I was so popular, she chuckled, but wanted to hide from this embarrassment. Though she took it in stride, considering it was all for Ash, and yes, Lucian is my brother, along with my Aunt Olympia. Kukui heard Olympia and gasped. The Anastar gym leader, the #1 authority of psychic Pokemon? Annabelle giggled and replied, "You must be a true fan." "But yes, she is. I could tell more, but it's not a big deal." Kukui replied as he would walk with Annabelle, "But she's an authority. And with you as the tough Salon maiden of the Battle Frontier, I'm sure you had some tough challengers." Annabelle paused for that moment. "Well, I haven't had too many good challengers except for one." Sheeta blushed at that part. "I say he owes me a final match someday." Kukui grinned, figuring out who she was referring to. "Trust me, he's tough to beat, and I can relate." That exhibition match in Alola was something to behold. Ash did tell Annabelle about that match, but to be confirmed by Kukui, only reaffirmed her admiration for her rival, lover. While Kukui was with Annabelle, Bernard and Delia would take over Ash to the Christmas tree, as they wanted to open presents now. "Kukui, let's go," she pouted as she went to grab her husband. Ash realized and panicked, not only not having gifts for Bernard, Kukui, Lay, but also for Annabelle as well. Delia sensed that worry, but reassured her son. "Don't worry, having you here is the best present available." She nodded, but Ash was worried he had nothing, but his buddy Pikachu would reassure what Delia told him, and he nods. "Thanks buddy, but..." "Oh wait." Ash figured out something, but realized he forgot his suitcase. Mom." Delia smiled and shook her head, knowing her baby. "While you and your friend were having fun, Professor Oak picked up both suitcases." He breathed a sigh of relief, because he had remembered something he picked up from the Galar region. Delia whispered in her ear, "If it's for your girlfriend, I know that look you made." Ash shook it off, trying to play it off. "She's not my girlfriend." But he couldn't keep a straight face to his mom, knowing she can read him like a book. Bernard would find Kukui and takes him over by the Christmas tree. It was long time to tell Ash everything, though it was still exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time. All right, time to get started on the presents. Delia had her cell phone to record the goodness. Seems Annabelle was doing the same with her phone. For Annabelle was more of possible blackmail to tease Ash, but just for him. Bernard would give Ash a large present. More flat, could be an ugly sweater, but who knows. "Thank you Bernard and Kukui." Ash would open the present and see a family painting of Bernard, Kukui, Lay, and Ash. In addition with Pikachu, Munchlax, and Growlithe. It says, "I hope that we can be like this forever." He smiled and shed a tear. He knew this was his Alolan family, but Bernard couldn't stand it any longer. "Ash, you know we care deeply about you, right?" Ash nodded, but replied, "Of course I do." "But you're quivering. What's wrong?" Bernard took a deep breath and smiled. "When you left the first time, I thought I would never see you again." She would wipe a tear, and came over to hug him. "When you came back, I just knew you would be home. Like a son to me." Ash heard that, and was figuring out what she meant. "You mean, you think of me as your son?" Kukui came over and smiled. "We do. It just took us a long time to admit that, and we were too scared to tell. We thought you wouldn't think of us as parents, even though you had your paternal mom." Delia was holding the tears in, but she felt that speech hit home. Annabelle couldn't help but shed tears, as she knew about losing and gaining family members. But this was something different. Ash looked over at them, and gives them a bigger hug. "So you guys want to be my guardians?" Ash saw them now, before he received the papers. He would look over, and saw his mom would have to sign as well. He teared up and would hug them tightly. "So can I call you Mom and Dad?" Bernard and Kukui nodded and would officially hug their new son. Delia and Annabelle recorded the happy moment, before weeping for joy. "Did I come too late?" Professor Oak saw the family embrace, as he came with the suitcases and some good spiked eggnog. "Of course that's for later." "Not at all, we just started." Bernard nodded, nuzzling her new baby boy. The party would continue as scheduled. Samson and Samuel started a karaoke duet. Good, but tough when Samson goes with his Pokemon impressions. Bernard and Kukui stole the show with their singing. Delia was not bad, along with Mr. Mime. But it was interesting to need Ash and Annabelle have their turn singing. Though Ash's moms had a blast videotaping the lovebirds. The nerves got the best of them, but they had fun and laughing at their own bad singing. About a couple of hours later, Ash and Annabelle would be by the deck, admiring the scene. Annabelle would see a little red box in Ash's hand. Is that for me? She was almost speechless to see that gesture of goodwill from him. Are you serious? Of course she was hoping he would say yes. Ash nodded, and present the gift to her. Merry Christmas, Annabelle. He smiled, as she would tear up, before opening the gift. She gasped, as it was a heart-shaped crystal on a string. A sweet necklace for a maiden. Ash would help put the necklace on her. It fits her beautifully. How did you get this? She would look at him with curiosity. Ash smiled and replied, I found it after a battle in the crystal caves of the Galar region. I thought I would hold onto it, until I can find a good use for it. She would hug him gently, caressing his cheeks gently. She saw him blush, which made her giggle. He saw her giggle, and grinned. What's so funny? A bit clueless, but only playing. He felt his nose poked, as she wanted to ask him a question. So, can you sense what I'm feeling? She was hoping he would get the right answer. When he looked into her eyes, he would lean in and kissed her on her lips gently. Her eyes widened, as she felt that kiss. That long-awaited moment she imagined became a reality. Ash, does that mean? Ash leaned in to kiss her on the lips again. Only this time for a longer period of time. She embraced the kiss, and leaned in to caress his hair. The kiss lasted for a minute, but felt like a lifetime. As the two looked at each other's eyes, no words can describe the moment. Little did they know, Delia and Bernard took pictures of the two kissing. Ash's moms slipped away, as not to disturb the moment. Though they were just excited to see the two lovebirds making it official. Of course they would playfully chat about possible wedding venues. The doorbell would ring. I'll get it. Kukui, holding on to his baby Lei, would answer the door, and he was in shock to see who's there at this time. It can't be, it's... I'll get it. Kukui, holding on to his baby Lei, would answer the door, and he was in shock to see who's there at this time. It can't be, it's... Before Kukui can freak out, Samuel would reply, Good evening, Lucian and Olympia. I hope your travels wasn't a rough one. Lucian and Olympia came in Sosbic ugly sweaters, as they had a couple of wrapped presents. Lucian would give Samuel some presents, except for one. Looks like something to wear. Thankfully not. Although we would have been earlier, we felt since it was the holidays, to bring gifts. Olympia replied with a smile on her face. Agreed, though I never expect to be here in a festive party. She had a feeling about a party, but her main focus is her niece. Speaking of which, have you seen Annabelle? She told me she would be here after her delayed flight. Kukui, after composing himself, introduced himself to them. I do apologize for my actions earlier. I never could have imagined to have an expert of psychic Pokemon to be here. Olympia smiled, seeing Kukui with his baby. She can sense so much joy coming out of him. A father of two, I take it? Kukui's eyes widened as he couldn't believe she got it right. He thought to himself, still starstruck. How did she know? I didn't even mention about Ash. Lucian couldn't help but chuckle. I'm sorry, my aunt can do that a lot. Annoying at best, but that's her ability, Olympia replied. My abilities are from the cosmos, but I do for the Pokemon world. As she was about to receive another vision, she got cut off by Bernard and Delia, who were in great cheer. Hi. Both were hugging Olympia, before taking her to the couch. Lucian chuckled as he asked Kukui about the two. Are you married to them both? Kukui shook his head. No, but I'll explain in short detail about the situation. Lucian nodded as he followed Kukui to the living room, as apparently Delia was showing everyone pictures from her photo album. Lucian would see Olympia showing pictures of him and Annabelle as kids. Oh goodness no, Aunt Olympia, must you show those baby pictures? Apparently cool and calm Lucian is a bit bashful when it came to his childhood. In other words, Auntie loves to embarrass her niece and nephew. Olympia replied. I couldn't help it. Seeing Ash as a baby just made me share. Lucian sighed, as he turned and covered his mouth, gasping, as he saw Annabelle out back with Ash, holding hands. In case you're wondering, Lucian, I had a feeling when the moms decided to pull me here. She chuckled. I'll let them have their fun. Eventually they will have to be here. Lucian knew it was he that was going to get Annie's wrath. Back by the deck, Annabelle rested her head on Ash's shoulder, as she would look out at the sky. All she could hope that this was no dream, Say Ash, am I dreaming, or did we just kiss? Ash smiled, caressing her head gently. It's no dream, he chuckled, hiding his face for a moment, still caught up in the moment. I do like. Love you. Her eyes widened when he said love, and that was all she needed to confirm that reality. I hope this night never ends. She smiled, but noticed a present floating in front of them. She turned around and saw a Metagross and a familiar or soon-to-be-dead relative. Happy holidays, sis. Lucian smiled, seeing the two together, as hoped sis wouldn't get too upset showing up. Annabelle pouted as she knew if Lucian was here, Olympia was close by. How long before she's showing our baby pictures? Lucian sighed and replied, it's a photo share out there. Trust me Ash, you're not in the clear. Ash gulped, knowing Mom had about 3 photo albums. And feared it was going to be one big reveal after another. Thanks Lucian. I guess you know about us, right? Lucian nodded, as Metagross presents them with the gift. Don't worry, I picked out the present this time. Annabelle laughed, as she would look at a confused Ash. But she would reassure him with a kiss on the cheek. Do not panic, it's nothing bad. Ash nodded, and when she opened the box, there were 2 ugly Christmas sweaters. One was a Nidorino for Ash, and a Nidorina for Annabelle. Both Ash and Annabelle got the hint, considering the sweaters, and would thank Lucian. Lucian smiled and gave them a hug. Well Ash, are you sure about being Annie's boyfriend? Lucian was only asking out of concern. He will be Annabelle's brother and protector. Ash looked at him and nods, before putting on the sweater. Of course I do. Though will be hard considering our situations. That was going to be the case, unless Annabelle decides to leave her post in the battle frontier. Or Ash decides to join her as a frontier brain. However, she would put on the sweater and hugs her new boyfriend. Don't sorry so much. Besides, we'll be chatting regularly. And I could probably tell where your next adventure will take you. Ash would hug her back, but for once he had no idea of his next spot. Usually an opportunity would come, and he would take it. For once, he'll try to relax, and enjoy being Annabelle's boyfriend. Lucian took the picture of the lovebirds in their new sweaters, as he saw Olympia, Delia, and Bernard join in for picture time. I guess hiding them was no chance, right? Lucian laughed, as the 3 shook their heads no. Olympia looked at them, and wanted to leave for the road, but had other plans. Annabelle, do you and Ash promise to behave tonight? Both Ash and Annabelle blushed a deep shade of red, probably thinking that was not their intentions. Aunt Olympia. Annabelle replied angrily, but saw Olympia giggle playfully. And what do you mean tonight? I thought we were leaving. Olympia nodded, but replied. That was the case, but it would be a long drive, and there's a lovely. Annabelle would hug her aunt, knowing she will have one more night with her now boyfriend. Thank you Olympia. Olympia looked at the necklace, and would whisper in her ear. Not bad, but down the line you'll have a smaller version of it down the line. Olympia grinned, seeing her niece blush a deep red. And Ash. He would look at her, before she would whisper in her ear, 2 should be plenty. It was intentional to throw him off. But she indicated about how many kids he and Annie will be blessed with. Annabelle pulled Ash over as she wanted to know what her aunt said to him. Olympia giggled, as she was chased around by her niece. You're not going to get away with it. Ash shook his head in disbelief, but took it in stride, as he was hugged by his moms. In the morning, Lucian, Olympia, and Annabelle were about to head out. Annabelle gave out one more hug and kiss to Ash, as she didn't want to leave. Lucian, can't we stay like one more night? Lucian smiled, but shook his head. Come on sis, he has your phone number. She pouted playfully, but understands. Ash, I hope you stay your sweet self. Ash nuzzles her, and gives her a final kiss. Just as they kissed, the doorbell rings. Kukui would glance at his lucky son, before opening the door. He gasped, but soon smiled seeing a familiar face, Guzma. What a surprise to see you here. Guzma, the leader of Team Skull, arrived with Plumeria in matching Seviper Christmas sweaters. Though Plumeria's sweater was a bit bigger, indicating she's carrying a baby. Although Guzma and Kukui don't see eye to eye, he would hug him and present him with some gifts. Now I have 2 rivals to deal with. Plumeria would gently poke him, not wanting to start any trouble. Sorry, I was going to see how you're doing and Hala told me you left for Kanto. He smirked, looking at Kukui, before looking over at Ash. "When are you returning to Alola? I want my rematch with you in the Alolan." Ash couldn't believe that offer. It would be intriguing to return, but wouldn't feel right, just popping up. But he looked at his dad and had one idea. Well, like father like son. "I'll return, but I'll challenge the winner of the Alolan League." Everyone gasped at that idea, but it was clear this would pique some interests. Guzma had a big smile on his face, as the idea of winning and getting his revenge was too sweet not to reject. "You are definitely the spitting image of Kukui, but I like your moxie, kid." It was a rarity to see Guzma smile. Then again, it was his last battle between Ash that opened his eyes about himself and his Pokemon. Plumeria would walk over to hug Ash, as she saw a young lady next to him. "So, are you going to introduce me to her?" She smiled, as Ash felt something kick. "As that?" Before he could finish, Plumeria replied, "Yep, twin girls. Will be a mother in weeks." She smiled, rubbing her belly gently. Ash would hug back gently and smiled, "Congrats on the new babies." Annabelle chuckled and breathed a sigh of relief, as what Olympia told Ash wasn't about him and her. She went over to hug Plumeria and smiled. "Congrats on the bundle of joy." Plumeria smiled and replied, "Someday you and Ash will share this beautiful moment." Annabelle's face flushed, as she glanced over at Olympia, trying to keep a straight face. She looked over at Kukui and had a pondering question. "When is the Alolan League?" Kukui was surprised, but answered, "In a couple of months." "Why?" Annabelle had a grin on her face and answered, "Because I'll be the one to have my rematch with my boyfriend." That threw everyone for a loop. Seems Annabelle has found a new challenge that would pique her interest. Kukui knew this tournament would be stacked. But now with already 2 trainers looking to face Ash in the exhibition match, only adds intrigue to the competition. Olympia looked over at her niece, and was impressed by her moxie. Maybe Ash's boldness is rubbing off. Lucian checked on his watch, as it was getting late. "I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we have to get going." Olympia and Annabelle nodded, as they would say their goodbyes. As they would leave, Annabelle went back to kiss him on the lips one last time. After a minute or two, she would whisper in his ear, "I love you, Ash, I always have, and always will." Ash looked into her eyes deeply, before whispering in her ear, "I love you too, Annie. I hope you win the Alolan League." She would look into his confident eyes, and rubs his cheeks gently, before Lucian would gently pull her away. "Let's go, Juliet, let Romeo have his time with his family." Ash waved to Annabelle, as she would blow kisses to her boyfriend. Guzma and Plumeria would leave as well. Delia shook her head, knowing her baby will be on the move again. But at least it's a familiar place, a home sweet home on the islands. Just moments from arriving at Annabelle and Lucian's house in Vermilion City. Annabelle was a bit nervous heading back home this time. Her Aunt Olympia smiled, as she didn't need any psychic vision to see that her niece was worried. "You'll be all right, Annabelle. Besides, your mother will figure you out once you arrive." Annabelle pouted as she looked at her. "Of course, you told her or sent pics to her." Olympia nodded as she poked her nose playfully. "And ruin my sister's fun?" She giggled, seeing her gasp, "Besides, your attire alone will give it away." Annabelle face palmed herself as she realized she was wearing a Nidorina ugly sweater. Plus, wearing a heart-shaped necklace was a dead giveaway. And not showing up at Mom's house as of yesterday, she had to agree, she was in for a barrage of questions. "All right, Auntie, you win." But she had an evil grin on her face. Something of a rarity for her family to see. "I won't be alone for this torture." Her brother Lucian chuckled, as he knew that side of her sister well. "Considering what you went through for Ash, it will be interesting to see how he handles our family." Annabelle chuckled, as she realized it was only fair for Ash to be grilled by her mother. And maybe a few of her friends as well. Olympia held her laughter, as this year's party will be one to remember. The cab would arrive at a lovely 2-story sub-mansion just on the outside of Vermilion City. It was quaint, and had over 2.5 acres, one for privacy and for intense Pokemon battles. Once everyone gathered their bags, Annabelle would ring the doorbell. She thought to herself as she awaited for Mom to open the door. "You can do this. It's just your mother, who would probably embarrass you into oblivion." She was nervous, but chuckled as to gather her courage. Then again, I had Ash's family practically did the work of 3 of my moms. So why not one more? The door opens, as a lovely purple-haired mother, wearing a alakazam ugly sweater with a green and red Christmas fuzzy hat. Annie, her nickname for Annabelle, you had me worried very much. I heard your flight was delayed, and you had to stay over a couple of days. She hugged her daughter, as she was like any other mother, worried for her safety, though their mother-daughter relationship is a bit rocky. It was clear the two are on the same page. I'm sorry, mother. I should have told more. But I had an idiot on a flight and... She was cut off as her mom placed her finger on her daughter's lips. She saw what Annie was wearing and had the biggest grin on her face. Let's head upstairs, we need to have a heart-to-heart talk. Annie giggled, as she turned to her giggling aunt and brother, who knew that this was about her new love. She smiled and headed upstairs with her mother. Once in Argenta's room, Argenta closed the door, before hugging her baby. Congratulations. So you finally reeled in your crush. Oh, I can't wait to meet him. Annabelle felt the hug, but had to ask. Did my brother or my aunt told you? Her mother giggled and replied. Let's see, my daughter has a heart-shaped Galarian necklace, a sunnier personality, and wearing a Nidorina ugly sweater. She smirked before continuing, sweetie, I don't need psychic powers to figure out that if you're wearing a Nidorina ugly sweater, then that means that your new boyfriend is wearing a Nidorino sweater. Annabelle couldn't believe that her mom nailed it without psychic abilities. Just like Burnett, it was simply mother's instinct, or a really bad tell given her attire. Alright mom, I guess I don't have to tell much. Then it hit her. If her brother and aunt didn't tell her mom about Ash, then how does she know? Mom, how do you know the boy I'm dating? Argenta smiled as she would answer. Well, you were careless with your diary 2 years ago. Annabelle eeped as she realized during that holiday party, all she could think about is Ash. And one thing led to another. She fell asleep with her diary open. And I glanced at your poetry and saw Ash in the poems. Annabelle thought she was in the clear, but not for Argenta. This was going to be a rough one for her. Annabelle pouted as she glared at her mom. You could have closed my diary without reading it. Argenta would hug her gently and replies. Annie, you came home feeling like you were on cloud 9. Something happened to you, and I wanted to know. Annabelle nodded, considering she did get teased from her aunt about her crush. Annie, aren't we forgetting something? Annabelle scratched her head, thinking she didn't forget something. Sorry mom, but I didn't leave anything behind. Argenta smirked and handed her the phone. Oh, how about calling Professor Oak to say you made it to your destination, safe and sound? Annie nodded, but pouted as she knew it was an excuse for her mom to go after Ash. Alright mom, but at least let me say hello. Her mom nodded as she would await for someone to answer. The video phone would answer, as it turned out to be Samson Oak, Professor Samuel Oak's cousin. He smiled seeing Annabelle on the line as he greeted her. Hello there Annabelle. I hope the trip wasn't too slow bro. He was imitating a slow bro as Annabelle giggled. No, all is well around here. She would see her mom at awe as she couldn't believe her luck. Annie, is Professor Oak imitating Pokemon? Or is that a Ditto in disguise? She smirked imitating a Ditto, which only made Annie and Samson chuckle. But Annie would answer. Sorry mom, that's his cousin Samson Oak. The principal of the Alolan school, Samson would chime in. It's true, my cousin is out with the group for a nice brunch. They should be coming back shortly. Samson saw the lady in Alakazam ugly sweater and grinned. Argenta. Sorry for not noticing you earlier. I'm just happy, imitating a happy, that your daughter is safe and with a new beau. Annabelle blushed hearing that, and seeing her mom grin like a Cheshire. As she chimed in. Professor, my mom is here in. Samson chuckled and replied. Sorry, couldn't help it. Just been a crazy couple of days, and I know your Nidorino, mimicking a Nidorino, will be happy to see his Nidorina, mimicking a Nidorina. Annabelle wanted to crawl under the bed from the embarrassment, as her mom was enjoying the show, but had to be nice to her baby. Professor, just as Argenta was going to ask him a question, she would hear a Pikachu in the background. Is that a Pikachu? She wondered if it was a wild Pikachu or not. Samson chuckled, as he saw Ash arriving with his Pikachu on his shoulder. In addition, he's holding his baby brother Lay. Not a wild Pikachu, mimicking a Pikachu, but a Nidorino with a baby. Argenta looked confused, but glanced at her daughter smiling, and realized what he meant. I see, can you tell that Nidorino? With a sinister grin on her face. That Annie needs to see him right away. She saw her daughter gulped, as she knew she had about a minute of alone time before the questioning takes place. Samson chuckled as he would leave a moment to tell Ash who was on the phone. Argenta slipped out of sight, as not to bother the couple for a moment. When Ash was on the phone, he smiled and blushed, seeing Annabelle. Happy holidays, Annabelle. I'm glad you made it to your house okay. Annabelle smiled and awed as she saw the two. Happy holidays to you, Ash and little Lay. She saw Ash's little brother and he was just adorable. Where did you go? I heard you went out for brunch. Ash replied, we did, though it was a longer stay than usual. Annabelle chuckled, as she could probably guess. First day as a big extended family? Ash shook his head no, Professor Oak's poetry hour? Ash nodded and smiled, but saw an older woman behind Annabelle. Happy holidays, Miss Argenta. Argenta pouted playfully as she replied. Oh my, aren't you two adorable together? So you're his big brother. Ash smiled and nodded. Say hi, Lay. Lay had other ideas, as he was focused on that Pikachu. Oh well, he's a blast to be with. Argenta smiled, as she had to ask Annie's new suitor. So, you're the young lad that has captivated my daughter's heart in the battle frontier. Ash nodded and replied, well, she had the crush on me. I didn't know at the time until we ran into other at the airport. Argenta could already picture the scene in her head, but giggled, as Burnett would take her baby Lay from him. Well, I guess you're the mother of the two adorable lads? Burnett smiled as she realized she was on a video chat. I am. And I'm taking a guess you're Annabelle's mother? Argenta nodded and smiled. I'm Argenta, #1 psychic trainer of the Battle Tower. And a proud mother of 2 psychic trainers. Burnett smiled as she saw Annabelle as well. My, couldn't wait for Ash to return so you can have a lovely chat? Ash's face turned red, as he couldn't believe his Alolan mom. Mom, it's not like that. Annabelle could only smirk as she saw Ash squirm a bit. She thought to herself, well Ash, if I had to deal with your meddling moms. You can too, love. Argenta saw that exchange and it was lovely to see. However, she chuckled as she saw one more lady appeared and hug Ash. Okay, what's going on? Are you his best friend? Annabelle smirked, as she would explain things. Well Mom, the best friend is actually Ash's paternal mother. And Professor Burnett is his legal guardian. Or Alolan Mom, however you slice it. Delia smiled and nodded. Sorry for barging in like this. I was looking for my son and here he goes. Already smooching it up with his girlfriend. Ash couldn't believe this as he wanted to slip away and hide. That only made Annabelle giggle in delight. Argenta got the gist of the situation as she looked at Ash's mom. Well, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Argenta, frontier brain of the battle hall in both Sinnoh and Johto. Delia smiled and replied. Well, I'm Delia Ketchum, and proud mother of my dear Ashy. She kept hugging him, only to add to his embarrassment. Say, why the holiday sweater, you guys are having a party? Argenta nodded and replied. It's true, I'm hosting my annual family holiday bash. Nothing too big, just friends and family all in holiday sweaters. Burnett looked at Delia and pouted. Delia, we were getting into the good stuff, before you interrupted the fun. Delia smirked and smiled. You mean how Ash and Annabelle found each other at the airport? Burnett gasped as she had to suspect that she got the call first. It was so cute to see them together. She chuckled at herself, although I thought Ash was with another boy. Was a bit surprised that his friend was a girl. Everyone chuckled at that part, as Annabelle did look like a boy at times. Annabelle smirked as she blew a kiss to Ash. Well, at least he likes me for who I am. Ash blushed, only to hear Burnett awe. Well, I say the airport scene is cute. I envision a young soldier returning from duty in the army. And once he got off the plane, he sees his wife in a sunflora dress, awaiting for him to come to her in a loving embrace. Ash wanted to die as he knew this could only get worse. His face got redder than a tomato berry. Delia giggled, as she had a better version. I see a young sailor returning home after a long voyage. Once his ship docks, he would see a young maiden in a light blue dress. And waiting for him are two lovely children, who are happy to see their daddy. Both Annabelle and Ash were red to the face hearing that version. Mom. Delia Ketchum no. Argenta couldn't help herself as she had the perfect scenery from one of her favorite stories. Oh, you're both wrong. I know the perfect moment. She would play the role of Ash, as it was obvious to Annabelle. But, soft. What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Annabelle is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. Who is already sick and pale with grief, that thou her maid art far more fair than she. Be not her maid, since she is envious, her vestal livery is but sick and green. And none but fools do wear it, cast it off, it is my lady, oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses. I will answer it. I am too bold, 'tis not to me she speaks. Two of the fairest stars in all the heaven, having some business, do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there, they in her head? The brightness of her cheek would shame those stars. As daylight doth a lamp, her eyes in heaven would through the airy region stream so bright, that birds would sing and think it were not night. See, how she leans her cheek upon her hand, oh, that I were a glove upon that hand. That I might touch that cheek. She would hear Annabelle say, I me, in her head, before continuing her piece. Oh, speak again, bright angel, for thou art as glorious to this night, being o'er my head, as is a winged messenger of heaven unto the white upturned wondering eyes of mortals that fall back to gaze on him when he bestrides the lazy pacing clouds and sails upon the bosom of the air. Her performance was too good that Olympia opened the door, so the guests can see it. Even Ash was recording it with his phone. And then, pulling her daughter over, as she positioned her in proper position. O Ash, Ash, wherefore art thou Ash? Deny thy father and refuse thy name. Or, if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. Argenta took a deep breath as she noticed a lot of laughter. And saw her sis Olympia chuckle. Olympia saw Ash and smirked. If you wonder why I'm so over the top at times, I get it from her. She points to Argenta, a bit embarrassed. Needless to say, Argenta hates to be one-upped by her sister and had a devilish grin on her face. Say sis, when did we have karaoke as the main entertainment? Both Ash and Annabelle gulped, as they feared the worst. Olympia knew her sis well and couldn't help but join in. I believe 5 years ago. Maybe we can let the lovebirds join in this year. Both Annabelle and Ash shook their heads no, as they were hopeful Bernard and Delia didn't spill the beans on their last performance together. Plus, it seemed Olympia was inviting Ash to the party. Argenta saw the lovebirds shook their heads, as she looked to Delia and Bernard. Tell me, during those 2 days, did you guys had karaoke? Both Ash and Annabelle replied at the same time, we'll sing tonight, promise. Argenta smirked as she could tell they did play karaoke. Alright you guys, I'll call back at about 3 p.m. So freshen up and remember to wear your holiday sweaters. Ash blinked as he knew from here to Vermilion City was about an hour or so. How do we get to your place, Miss Argenta? Isn't it a long drive from here? Argenta nodded and smiled. Oh, leave that to me. Besides, I want to see your whole family. And I know you'll want to see my Annie, right? Ash's flushed face said it all, as his mom's giggle in delight. Delia smiled as she would end the call. Don't worry, we'll be ready and he'll change his you-know-what. Ash hid his face as Annabelle giggled, Mom. As the call ends, Argenta blinked from that last part. You know what? Annabelle answered and giggled, she meant underwear. Argenta nods as she had one more question for her daughter. First kiss or after your first date? Annabelle blushed a deep red, as she pointed to her necklace. Well, after he gave me the necklace, I asked him if he understood what I was sensing. Argenta smiled and smirked. Go on. Annabelle blushed before continuing. He looked into my eyes, before kissing on my lips. She knew her mom would gush at the girly stuff, but had to admit, it was nice to talk about her love. The second kiss was longer and I knew then that it was official. Argenta would hug her baby as she couldn't be happier for her daughter. Meanwhile, Lucian was in his deerling sweater, as he was the greeter for the guests that would arrive. He heard the doorbell and would answer, Happy holidays. And, blushing a bit, "You're here early." Meanwhile, Lucian was in his deerling sweater, as he was the greeter for the guests that would arrive. He heard the doorbell and would answer, "Happy holidays, Sabrina." And, blushing a bit, "You're here early." Sabrina in an ugly sweater, hugs her apparent lover. She is the current champion of the Kanto region, and was once a student of Argenta in the battle hall. Sabrina, once the leader of the Saffron Gym, was feared as the toughest psychic trainer of the Kanto region. Ever since her loss to Ash, she was much calmer and more determined to be a better trainer. Although at 30 years old, she couldn't help being her wicked self. She fell in love with the 23-year-old Elite Four member, and son of Argenta. I can't help it, she was hugging her beloved. Besides, today is the day we tell Argenta about us. Lucian chuckled and forgot about today. I'm sorry, to be honest, my mind was focused on the main event that will happen later. Sabrina pouted as she poked his chest. Oh, and who is more important than me? He whispers in her ear about Annabelle and new boyfriend. He saw her gasped as he grinned like a Cheshire. I couldn't believe it either. But he'll be here later with his family. Sabrina smiled as she never thought Annabelle would find love. Let alone someone she battled with. Well, tonight I have my dancing shoes ready for the talent show tonight. She smiled and did a few ballet moves but felt a poke by Lucian. Sorry love, change of plans, he chuckled. It's karaoke night this year. Sabrina glared at him before tickling him. You did this. You know I can't sing to save my life. Lucian laughed but pointed to Olympia. Sorry, but my aunt caught her sister in one of her dramatic scenes and you know the rest. Sabrina stops tickling him as she nuzzles him. Okay, but you're singing with me. I can't be dying without my lover. Lucian nods, but knew he'll be in for a laugh fest. While Sabrina and Lucian would get settled and would meet the other guests and Lucian's relatives. Back in Argenta's room, Argenta would ponder as she was almost in a daze. Annabelle noticed her mom in that state and was curious. Mom, are you all right? Argenta nodded and answered. Tell me Annie, when you looked at Ash, did you notice something unique about Ash? Annabelle blushed a bit. Outside of his good nature and Pokemon skills? Not that I've noticed. Why mother, is he something of my past life or something? Argenta smiled and kissed her forehead gently. No, but come later, I'll find out myself. Argenta didn't want to say why, but had her reasons. Besides, she hears the cab and a bunch of familiar voices. I do say you are needed downstairs. Annabelle giggled as she could tell her frontier brains are here for the party. All right mom, I guess the party is going to really start. Argenta smiled and giggled as it will be hard for her Annie to hide the fact that she now has a boyfriend. Let alone who her boyfriend is. She chuckled as this will be more entertaining than most of their talent shows. As Annabelle goes downstairs, she would hear the doorbell and opens it. To her relief Scott was there in a Snorlax ugly sweater. Happy holidays Scott. She would hug the boss of the Hoenn Battle Frontier, as he smiled, noticing her necklace and sweater. Well Wheel, never thought you would be engaged in a relationship. Annabelle blushed as she forgot she was still wearing a Nidorina sweater and her necklace. You got me Scott. Gotta warn you, Mom's planning karaoke this year. Scott chuckled as he knew it was going to be a train wreck this year. Just as he spoke a pissed-off martial artist in a Hariyama sweater came up to poke Annabelle's belly. You have a lot of nerve not calling me. Me and Scott were worried sick about you. Annabelle felt the pokes and winced. Sorry Greta. A lot happened after my flight got delayed in. Before Annabelle could finish, Greta saw the necklace and sweater. Before whispering in her ear, so you finally snagged him. Can't wait for him to come. Annabelle couldn't help hiding her flushed face. As she forgot that she told Greta a week after Ash battled her. Greta, believe me it was a case of luck that I found him. Another young lass, Lucy came out of the cab. But this time in a Seviper sweater. Well, I expected to be a dull party. But after hearing our salon maiden has a prince, maybe we can have a wedding tonight. Lucy smirked only to have Annabelle playfully pound her fists to her shoulders. Annabelle, already flushed, had to make her peace to her friends. Mom would kill me if that happened. Besides, his family will be there as well. Scott smiled hearing family, as he was intrigued as he failed to ask Ash of his family. Well, fill us in Annabelle. At least when he arrives, it won't be as awkward. Annabelle nods, as she would take the trio inside. A couple of moments after they had drinks, they would be out back, as Annabelle would tell the trio about Ash's family, and boy, it was a bundle to handle. Scott looked at Annabelle and chuckled. So if I'm right, he has two moms, a dad, and a baby brother? Annabelle nodded, showing the pictures. Especially the ones of Ash and his brother Lay. Both Lucy and Greta couldn't help but admire the two. Greta pouted as she looked at Annabelle. Ash's dad is a professor, and the masked royal? Annabelle nodded as Lucy chimed in. Professor Burnett sounds like a great mom to me. I hear her dad was a tough customer. Annabelle heard vaguely about Burnett's late father. Well, I have to ask her more about him. She says that Ash reminds her of her late father. Scott smiled as he would look at Annabelle. So, you want to take an extended leave of absence? I know it has been boring without challengers lately. But to leave the frontier? Annabelle sighed, but nodded before answering. I do. I want to compete, and staying on the perch won't help. Scott nods, knowing that fiery personality runs deep in her family. And besides, I'll work hard and show that OK can be as tough outside of the confines of the frontier. Scott smiled, but had one question. Which contest or league you're aiming for? Annabelle smiled and answered, I'll be competing in the Alola League. And I'll win for sure. The trio nods, but Lucy knew there was more to just the league. What gives? Why a Pokemon League? Not like there is a big cash prize for the winner. Greta chimed in. I smell a rat. Spill it, Annabelle. You never had one interest in a league nor a contest. And now you're going to be in one? What's the prize that is worth the trouble? Annabelle poked her index fingers, before blushing. Whoever wins this year's Alolan League gets a full 6-on-6 exhibition battle with last year's champ Ash. Greta and Lucy smirked, as that was something of a prize. Greta, with a grin on her face, replied, So when you win, and after your battle, you'll approach him and get on one knee? Annabelle fully flushed and chased Greta all over the yard. Not funny, Greta. Lucy smirked as she pondered that prize and looked at Scott. Say, Scott, is Ash still considered to be a candidate as a brain? He nodded, but sensed something of a challenge, and had a feeling he may lose one more brain. You want to test Alola as well? Lucy thought of it and nods. Why not? Besides, maybe I'll get Annie's bow on a honeymoon trip. Annabelle heard that and chased after Lucy as well. You know I'm the only one for my Ashy. Scott chuckled as he would have to ask Ash when he arrives about the Alolan League. About 2 minutes before 3 p.m., Ash and his family were all ready by the videophone. As Delia would wipe his cheeks gently, Mom, I'm okay. Besides, it will be a nice party. Ash was trying to be confident. But in reality, he was going to be meeting Annabelle's family and friends. Plus round 2 of karaoke, bound to be a crazy one. I know, sweetie. But just remember to not overdo it. With an evil grin, she whispers in her ear, Please don't plan on proposing. You still have time, of course. Ash blushed a deep red hearing that. Mom. Everyone laughed as the call would come in. They would see Argenta smiling as she had her Alakazam as well. All right, everyone, ready to go. They were confused at first, but realized what was going to happen and breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, everyone, hold hands and my Alakazam will teleport you all here. Everyone nodded and held hands, awaiting for the call. Argenta told Alakazam to use teleport, and everyone was in the backyard of Argenta's home. Wow! They gasped at the place, and the yard, as this was something to behold. Argenta waved to them as she smiled. Welcome to my holiday bash, everyone. She smiled as her jaw dropped, seeing Ash's family. In particular, Professor Kukui. Hello, hello, Mr. Masked Royal. To say Argenta is a fan is an understatement. Kukui chuckled as he saw her. I guess we're even then. When I met your sister I was starstruck as well. Argenta saw into his eyes and sensed something quite odd about him. Yes, I can see why the bond is deep between you and Ash. Burnett looked over as she was a bit baffled by that message. She asked her as she was just concerned. Tell me, can you sense the bond between me and Ash? Argenta smirked as she would poke her nose gently. There's no need to sense what I already know. From one mom to another, I know the bond is strong. She chuckled to herself. Besides, no mom can interrogate a young man's date like you. Burnett giggled. holding onto her other son lay when she heard that. Well, I never expected Ash to bring in a lovely girl over, and had my suspicious. She chuckled as Ash was long gone. Both Argenta and Burnett thought at the same wavelength, searching for Annabelle. As Ash and Pikachu were looking around for Annabelle, he found a familiar face with a Rhyperior. Happy holidays, Palmer. Palmer, the leader of the battle tower, saw Ash and hugged him. He didn't expect to see him here and knew this was an interesting turn of events. Happy holidays, Ash. Long time no see, Ash replied. Same here. You were invited to the party too? Palmer nodded but glanced over at Ash's Nidorino sweater and chuckled. So I guess I know who Annabelle is dating. Ash shook his head, forgetting that his sweater is an indication that he has a lover. Say, can we trade sweaters? Palmer laughed and replied. No way. Besides, this is my good luck Raiden sweater. And don't worry, I'm glad you found someone special. Ash thought he was going to be teased but wasn't. A bit of a relief as he smiled. Thanks. He looked around, noticing someone missing. Is your son Barry there? Palmer shook his head. No, sorry, he's getting ready for Kalos. Wants to get ready for his next league. Oh, don't worry, you'll get a fine for sure. He chuckled as that catchphrase was infectious. Ash smiled but saw Pikachu's ears twitch. And on instinct that he thought there was trouble, but got licked by a familiar Pokemon. Hey, he saw the Pokemon and smiled. Haunter? Is that you? Haunter the ghost Pokemon smiled, as it was making goofy faces. Ash laughed as he knew this one well, but never expected when he was hugged from a certain gym leader. Glad to see you made it, Ash. Ash turned around and saw Sabrina and smiled. Wow. Long time no see and happy holidays. She smiled and replied. Happy holidays to you too. I never thought I would see you again. Ash replied. Me either. It's been so long since our last battle. Sabrina chuckled. You say battle, I call it a laugh fest. Ash nods, but couldn't help chuckling, remembering the last battle between him and Sabrina. It was Haunter who somehow calmed the psychic savage and rescued Misty and Brock from a dull fate. Ash had to ask about her since that battle. So Sabrina, what are you up to now lately? She smiled and looked at the young trainer, and gives him a kiss on the cheek. That's for getting me out of that psychic funk. She smirked, seeing him blush a bit from that kiss. And I'm Kanto's reigning champion. His eyes widened as he never thought she would be the champion of Kanto. Congratulations, Sabrina, I'm happy for you. She smiled but points to Lucian and smirks. Let's just say we're happy together. Ash couldn't believe that and smiled. Congratulations on the relationship, Sabrina. Sabrina smirked and replied in kind. Congrats on being Annabelle's boyfriend. Ash smiled but had to take it in stride, as there was no way he could change sweaters. He did look around to see if anyone was there. Say, Sabrina, have you seen Annabelle by chance? Before she could answer, Lucian would come from behind and tickles her sides. Hey, careful now, I'm ticklish. Lucian smiled as he would see Ash. I hope she didn't cause too much trouble. Sabrina stuck out her tongue playfully like a haunter, before Ash answered. Not at all. Just wondering if. Before he could continue, Lucian points to the trio with Scott. Ash gasped, seeing familiar faces. I advise to be careful. Greta is on the warpath for you. Ash chuckled and thanked them. Before heading to the area, once he was close, he jumped back as Greta launched a kick in his direction. Well, the star of the show has arrived. Happy holidays to you and Pikachu. Lucy smiled as she would walk up towards Greta. Happy holidays to you as well. Ash shook his head before smiling. Happy holidays to you both. Long time no see. He chuckled as Pikachu was on Greta's shoulder. I take it Annabelle invited you over? Greta nodded and poked his belly. Yay, but I blame you for making our salon maiden all warm and fuzzy. Ash laughed as Annabelle couldn't help record the interactions. Lucy smirked but had a question. Say, Ash, is Brock with you? She said so with a blush as Greta caught on to that. Hey, I can't have another member go boy crazy. Lucy pouted and looked at Greta. Why can't I have a boyfriend? Greta puffed up, but Ash would step in between to break up the little spat. Sorry to say, Lucy, but Brock is not with me. He's studying to become a doctor. Both of the girls heard that and envisioned Brock in a doctor's uniform. Annabelle couldn't help but move in and zoom in on her friends. And you say I'm not boy crazy? Greta and Lucy pouted as they chased Annabelle for her cell phone. Ash smiled, as he would see Scott come up to hug him. So Ash, I guess you're the prize at the end of the Alolan rainbow. Ash nodded, as he could only suspect that Annabelle told them about the Alolan League. You got me, Scott. It was at the party at Professor Oak's where Guzma asked me for a rematch. And I decided was only right to challenge the winner of this year's Alolan League. Scott nods, as he knew this would bring a bunch of high-level competitors. Still he had one question. Still thinking of becoming a frontier brain? Ash scratched his head and ponders. Still undecided right now. So much has happened lately. I can't say right now. Scott nods, but whispers in his ear. Can I be at the wedding? Ash hid his face as that was a bit too soon. Annabelle returned to wrap her arms around her Nidorino. So Ash, enjoying the party? He smiled and nods. Of course, just a whirlwind of familiar faces. I don't know who will show up next. As if on cue, he would hear a loud, yet familiar sound. Annabelle smiled as she knew the Pokémon quite well. Everyone backed up as a Latios appeared on the lawn. A trainer would leap off of Latios, as he thanked his friend. The grayish-blue-haired trainer in a Darkrai ugly sweater. Am I late to the party? Annabelle smiled, as she shook her head no. Not at all, Tobias. The party that just started. Ash gasped as Tobias did the same. Neither thought they would see each other again, let alone at a holiday party. Pikachu broke the tension as it went up to nuzzle Latios. Latios smiled and nuzzled back, as Tobias smiled. Well Ash, long time no see. Ash nods and replies. Same here, Tobias. He chuckled as this was still a big surprise. What have you done since our last battle? Tobias answered. I'm Sinnoh's Grand Champion. In case you're interested. Tobias smirked as Ash would chime in. I'm the first Alolan League champion. Still striving to be a Pokémon master. Tobias smiled as he could tell Ash got stronger since their last battle. Annabelle smirked and pouted to both trainers. You both faced each other? Both Ash and Tobias laughed, seeing Annabelle pout. But Tobias would respond. It was at the Sinnoh League semifinals where we compete each other. Annabelle nods but knew of him winning. Not who he beat. Ash, how did you fare against him? She knew his Pokémon and knew Darkrai was his ace. Well, Annabelle took down Darkrai and Latios. He saw her gasp at that, before continuing, unfortunately, used up all 6 Pokémon to do so. Tobias chimed in. To be honest, I had no clue of Ash's Pokémon determination, and to have 2 of my Pokémon defeat was a real eye-opener. Annabelle would look at Tobias, to whom is another apprentice of Argenta, despite being older than her. If my mom found out about this, Tobias laughed and nods. Oh, your mom knew and chewed me out for it. He laughed as he could replay that moment. All she said was you better face him again if you have the chance. And it looks like I might get that opportunity. Annabelle smiled, as she knew there was only one holiday battle of Argenta's choosing. Or another from her family to make it happen. Annabelle looked at Ash with a smile. Wanna treat our guests to a rematch with Tobias? Just as Ash was going to accept the opportunity. Argenta appeared and looked at the young suitor. No, oh Juliet, my sweet Juliet, the house of the Capulets have suffered enough from this Montague. To save thy house and manor, 'tis only fitting that the head shall fight for thy honor. Everyone knew Argenta can be overly dramatic, but this sounds like she is fighting for more than just pride. Tobias would intervene and ask Argenta. Miss Argenta, why can't I face Ash? Argenta smirked and answered. You'll get your chance. But Sir Knight of Sinnoh, let thy queen do battle for the house of Capulet. Tobias knew of her intentions and played along. As you wish, my lady. Do what is to be done with your daughter's lover. Even Tobias couldn't help but smirk, as this was getting interesting. Argenta turned to Ash, as she was not going to be denied of this opportunity. Young Ash, may thou have a battle with me in the battlefield? Ash was a bit confused by her acting, but knew what she meant. I accept your challenge, Argenta. She smiled, as she would make it official. This year's Pokémon Holiday Battle will be a 2-on-2 affair. No time limit, both trainers can substitute at any point. Whoever's Pokémon can survive the longest, shall be the victor. Annabelle couldn't believe this. Her lover against her mother for the first time. She was worried, because her mother was no ordinary trainer. To say league champion and multiple Ribbon Cup champ is a doozy of an opponent. But she saw Ash's eyes lit up like a Christmas tree and felt something she never felt before. Ash, are you sure about this? My mom won't hold back, nor show any mercy. He nodded as he looked at Annabelle, with a smile on his face. All the better to make it memorable. She never saw Ash this determined and feared this battle could end up getting someone hurt. Not too far off from the guests, Bernadette had a bad feeling about this as she looked at Olympia with concern. Why she would choose my son for this battle? Olympia sighed as she knew. This was eventually going to happen. Her theatrics may be over the top. But it speaks the truth. She is fighting for the honor of her family. Your son bested us and her apprentices. She knew this was her only shot at facing Ash. Bernadette nods, but snapped. So is my son's love for Annabelle is all a lie? Olympia answered. No, their love is true as the sun and moon. It's fate that brought us to this epic match. Bernadette knew she could see into the future. Before she could even ask, she was cut off by Olympia. In case you're wondering if I know the outcome, I don't. For once, I'll be rooting on my sister right to the end. Bernadette nods as she replied in kind. Then I'll root for my son, right to the end. About 5 minutes later, a young professor wearing a Ralt's ugly sweater, carrying a few gifts and a basket full of berries, would arrive at Argenta's house. He would come up to the front door and saw a notice. To any guests for the party. All are at the backyard for the holiday battle. He sensed something big as he could feel the battle brewing. I wonder who is battling this year. As he would head around back, he spots a familiar friend. Gardevoir. Happy holidays. Gardevoir smiled and takes the basket of berries. Gardevoir. He didn't notice at first. But she has a lovely pendant with a rare stone on it. Is that a? About 5 minutes later, a young blue-haired professor, Professor Casson, wearing a Ralt's ugly sweater, was carrying a few gifts and a basket full of berries. He would arrive at Argenta's house a bit late to his liking. He would come up to the front door and saw a note. To any guests for the party. All are at the backyard for the holiday battle. He sensed something big as he could feel the battle brewing. I wonder who is battling this year. As he would head around back, he spots a familiar friend. Gardevoir. Happy holidays. Gardevoir smiled and takes the basket of berries. Gardevoir. He didn't notice at first. But she has a lovely pendant with a rare stone on it. Is that a Gardevoirite on your pendant? She nodded as she would escort him towards a familiar spot in the area. He thought to himself as he was carrying the presents. So Argenta has a new Pokemon that can Mega Evolve. Gardevoir smiled as she knew he would be thinking about the pendant. But had plans of her own. Meanwhile, not too far from the house, everyone was gathered as they would see a battle arena. Many knew this arena was the spot to train their Pokemon. But it's the site for the annual holiday battle, and this year's one promises to be huge. Kukui looked on and was rather nervous. A rarity for him as he had a feeling about something. Bernadette, holding onto her son Lei, noticed Kukui and asked. Hun, what's wrong? Out of all of us, you should be the most excited about your son battling. He nodded and answered. True, but can you feel the energy out there? It's just like Pony Island. She gasped as she was a bundle of emotions back then. But realized what he meant. You mean when you fought my dad? Then it hit her that if what Kukui say is true, then that means that we have to brace for impact when it happens. Kukui nodded and saw Annabelle approach them. She, like Kukui, had a feeling this battle would not be for the faint of heart. Kukui, I'm worried. I never saw Ash this calm before a battle. My mother may be over the top, but she won't hold back for anyone. And yet, he's going into the lion's den without a care in the world. Before Kukui can answer, Bernadette would reply with a smirk. Ash is definitely the spitting image of my late father. Though at times reckless, he would show no fear in the battle. She can remember in particular, Ash's last grand trial on Treasure Island. To say nearly had a motherly breakdown is an understatement. He won't back down, no matter the opponent or the situation. Annabelle nodded but had one question. Everyone has talked about your dad. What did he look like? Bernadette chuckled as she knew this could be funny. Promise not to get mad at us? Annabelle nodded as she braced for it. He's not Ash's father. But, you know. She would show Annabelle the picture of her late father and her face was redder than any traffic light. "That's your father." Bernadette chuckled as she saw Greta and Lucy peek over Annabelle's shoulder. Greta couldn't help herself at this opportunity. Well, I guess we can wait a few years before pursuing Ash." Lucy chimed in as well. "Say, if Brock is unavailable, are you cool about an open relationship?" Annabelle shooed the two out as she was still flustered about the picture. "Bernadette, this has to be a joke. He's Ash, like 20+ years in the future." Olympia slid in and would whisper in her niece's ear. "Don't rush it, Annie. When you get older, you'll be spending more time with him like this." She smirked as she had to keep her thoughts PG. "Aunt Olympia, I'm already 10 shades of red right now." She pouted, but in the back of her mind she had thought of what Ash might look like down the road. To say she got her wish is priceless. Palmer would be on the field in an official Pokémon referee uniform, as he will lay out the ground rules for this match. This is Argenta's annual holiday battle set in the House of Capulets. Apparently Palmer was given announcement cards. The match will be a 2-on-2 battle. There will be no time limit, and both trainers can substitute Pokémon at any time. The winner will be the trainer with any remaining Pokémon. Everyone was still on edge as they were dying to see the trainers come out. Okay. Representing the House of Montague, he is the first Alolan League champion, Ash Ketchum. Ash would come out, along with his buddy Pikachu. He would be greeted with cheers from Annabelle and his family as there was a calm demeanor from him. Something felt at ease with him, maybe because he thinks of this battle like a gym battle. But Pikachu felt something different from Ash. He's not worried, but knew it was going to be big. Palmer saw Ash would be on his side, as he would read the announcement of Ash's opponent. And now, lords and lasses, representing the House of Capulets. She is a 3-time Ribbon Cup champion, a league champion of Johto and a 2-time league champion of Sinnoh. Everyone thought this was overkill to announce Argenta. But this was her party and would let Palmer continue. And the Hall Matron of Sinnoh and Johto, Lady Queen Argenta. Argenta would come out slowly, in a red and gold medieval hennin, or headdress. The style looked like a heart, and covered with jewels around the heart. It's draped with a lace red gown as she would appear with regality, despite wearing her Alakazam ugly sweater. As she turned to her side of the arena, she looked over at Ash, and had a smile on her face, to which Annabelle, Lucian, and Olympia saw with gasps. They knew this was Argenta before a battle. Like the calm before the storm, that was her true nature. As everyone saw the trainers awaiting the start, Scott was sitting right by Delia, along with her Mr. Mime videotaping the battle. "Had a question. Miss Delia? I have to ask, have you seen your son like this before a battle?" Delia smiled as she would answer in kind. "Well, Scott, I would say the only other time I've seen him like this was when he took on Professor Kukui." But she looked at her Ashy and knew that wasn't the case. "I would say this is the first time I've seen him this relaxed. Either he has a strategy already, or he's putting on a great poker face." He smiled as he replied. "I hope you're right about this." Scott looked at Ash once again and even he was perplexed. Sure, he saw him face Brandon 4 times to finally win the Battle Frontier. But even those times, he never saw him like this. Palmer stepped back as he would make the first call. Lady Queen Argenta would call out her first Pokémon. Argenta smiled as she pulled out her first Pokémon. Now the curtain opens to a battle like no other. The stars align as the spirits watch the conflict resolve. May the spirits guide the Capulet and Montague to a peaceful resolution. Olympia chuckled as she thought her sis was at it again, being overly dramatic. "Come on sis, we do have karaoke tonight." Argenta pouted, as she hated to be rushed. "Alas poor sis, it will end in a moment." She tossed her Pokeball in the air. Drifblim take the stage. Everyone saw a floating purple and yellowish looking balloon Pokémon. Seems Baby Lay thought it was a balloon and was trying to grab it. Despite being held by Mama Bernadette, Bernadette looked at her son and smiled. "Don't worry, Daddy will show you what it is." She nodded as Kukui would pull out his Pokédex and show his son a description. Drifblim, a balloon Pokémon. A ghost and flying type. Some say this Pokémon is a collection of souls burdened with regrets, silently drifting through the dusk. Kukui looked at Ash and wondered what he was going to pull out first. He thought to himself as he was nervous. All right son, what will you counter with? Ash smiled as this was not his first encounter with Drifblim. He chuckled as Pikachu would leap off his shoulder and looked on. Normally he would leap onto the battlefield, but had a feeling it won't be battling today. Ash looked at Argenta with a smile, as he has his Pokeball out. This ought to be a blast. But at least I'll have a ghost of a chance this time. Argenta looked on, as he tossed his Pokeball out. Gengar, I choose you. As Gengar would appear, everyone gasped at the size of the ghost Pokemon. Delia smiled as she remembered that Pokemon from last year's party. Our party ghost has come once again. Burnett, who couldn't help herself, had to chime in. Like grandpa, like grandson. Kukui smiled as he saw Ash's Gengar. It was as big as Acerola's Gengar. He had to agree with his beloved. Imitating your grandpa, Ash? I know this will be good. The others were surprised by Gengar's size. But apparently Annabelle rushed to the battlefield, with a grin on her face. She would approach Gengar as she wanted to know this Pokemon's past and feelings. I see, Gengar blinked, as Annabelle looks at him. Your former trainer abandoned you. He claimed you were bad luck, but looks like your luck has changed with Ash. Am I right? Gengar smiled and licked her, causing her to giggle. All right, she would kiss his cheek gently. You stay safe out there. She would approach Ash and kiss his cheek gently. You better not lose out there, love. That caught Ash by surprise as he didn't expect her to kiss him prior to battle. Argenta saw that kiss and was upset. Treacherous daughter of Capulet. How dare you side with that Montague? Annabelle giggled and stuck her tongue out playfully. Sorry mother, but I have to root for my boyfriend. All Annabelle could hear are snickers from Greta and Lucy as she knew she'll never hear the end of it. Argenta and Ash shook their heads before getting back to the battle at hand. Argenta looked at Gengar and knew for its size, it would be giving up speed. Before she could make her move, Ash would start out with one. Gengar use mean look. Gengar's eyes glow dark red, as eyes appear all over, before Drifblim was glowing slightly red. This move prevents Argenta from switching Pokemon. Olympia saw that move and knew her sis wouldn't like it. She knew sis doesn't like to be confined or backed into a corner. Well sis, looks like Ash has picked up a few tricks. She had to giggle a bit, knowing Ash is one trainer that you can't predict. Argenta smirked as she didn't anticipate that move, but would make her move. Alright Ash, you want a ghost fight? I'll make you regret this. Drifblim, use quick attack. Drifblim moved towards Gengar with breakneck speed. Ash knew his Gengar was at a disadvantage in the speed department, but had some tricks to make up for it. Gengar wait for it. Ash saw Drifblim and made the move. Use lick. When Drifblim was in range, Gengar would use his long tongue to knock Drifblim to the side. Argenta was surprised that lick attack had some power as she didn't show her frustration, but wanted to keep going on the attack. Drifblim used Thunderbolt. Ash saw that and would counter. Gengar used Thunderbolt as well. Both attacks cancel each other out, as so far Gengar is holding its own against Argenta's first Pokemon. Lucian looked on and saw his mother cool and calm with a smile on her face. But he can tell she was getting frustrated that she has yet to break Ash's strategy. He thought to himself, Mother, don't let Ash get to you. He's unpredictable, yes, but you're in coordinator. Use that to your advantage. Argenta looked at Gengar and thought of something sweet. Alright Ash, try this out. Drifblim, spin around and while spinning, use Will-O-Wisp. Drifblim spins like a top before launching bright purple flames towards Gengar. Ash saw this and smiled, as he knew that strategy well. Gengar, use Shadow Ball back to back. His Gengar would launch Shadow Balls and once again both attacks cancel out. The two attacks showcase a wonderful firework display, which got oohs and ahs from the crowd. Tobias saw Argenta's expression of disbelief and knew this was getting bad for her. He looked over at Annabelle, who was just as concerned about the battle. Annabelle, have you seen your mother like this? Annabelle sighed and replied. No, Ash is besting her, not only by moves, but by his knowledge of contest moves as well. It's not like for her opponent to be a step ahead of her, but she's facing what we're up against, an unpredictable opponent. Argenta looked over at Ash and Gengar and saw how relaxed he was. She thought to herself, how can he be this calm after that? And here I am the one struggling. She shook her head trying to calm herself. So this why my daughter said that he's hard to predict. She smiled knowing beating him would be sweeter. Now I know what to do. Ash looked over at his Gengar, as he knew they would have to be ready for anything. Stay sharp out there, Gengar. Gengar nods as Argenta would declare her next attack. Drifblim, use ominous wind. Drifblim eyes glowed purple, before a gust of purple haunting wind would head towards Gengar. Ash quickly would make his move. Gengar dodge, his Gengar would dodge the attack. Only to see Drifblim right above him. Argenta knew her speedy Pokémon would make this possible. And was now ready for the final strike. Alright Drifblim, use Hypnosis. She saw her friend used no attack as she was baffled. Drifblim, why aren't you using Hypnosis? Then she gasped and saw Gengar glow a dark purple. Her anger was justified as she knew the ability. Burnett saw the glowing Gengar and was surprised. What happened to Gengar? How it avoided Hypnosis? Olympia would chime in. Ash's Gengar has Cursed Body as an ability. Meaning at any time, it can disable a move for a short period of time. Burnett smiled as she chanted. Way to go, Gengar. Olympia couldn't believe that luck. But chuckled as she had to admit, that was Ash all right. Something like that would change the landscape of a battle. Ash saw this opening and didn't waste time. Gengar used Shadow Ball back to back. Gengar would leap up and launch multiple Shadow Balls that would hit Drifblim, knocking it to the ground. Drifblim, Argenta couldn't believe her friend was down from a super effective move. But before she could counter, Ash would finish this. Gengar use Ice Punch. Gengar would move in, as his right hand turned icy white, as it would strike Drifblim for a super effective finish. The impact caused a brief little cloud, but as it settled, Drifblim was frozen solid. Palmer moved in to make it official. Drifblim is unable to battle. The crowd cheered as they were in shock to see Argenta's first Pokémon go down. Annabelle in particular, wanted to hug Gengar, but was shocked to see Gengar glow red, and in pain. Ash looked on as he was baffled by this. Gengar, what's wrong? Lucian knew this and chimed in. That's Aftermath. If a Pokémon finishes off another Pokémon with a contact attack, the Pokémon in question loses at least a quarter of health. Annabelle saw her mother smile, as she returned Drifblim to her Pokéball. She thought to herself at that moment. Even in defeat, you're already striking back with a vengeance. She looked over at Ash with concern. Love, be careful. My mom won't hold back any longer. Palmer checked out Gengar as he asked Ash a question. Ash, do you want to switch Pokémon? Ash looked at Gengar and asked him. Want to take a break, pal? Gengar shook off that ability and shook his head. No, seems he's ready to go. No, Palmer, Gengar will continue. Meanwhile, not too far from the battlefield, Gardevoir and the professor would arrive at a special tree. Out of all the trees, this tree still has its leaves. And it holds a nice surprise. Casson would smile as he would see the holiday tree as vibrant as ever. Well, it's a tree with a large hollow that he uses to hide gifts for his family. But he smiled as a group of Ralts and Kirlias would emerge. Hello everyone. Sorry I'm a bit late, but I'm here with your presents. Gardevoir would present the basket of berries from Galar, as the group would run up and playfully tackle Casson. Before hugging him for the delicious sweet berries. Careful, I'm ticklish, he laughed as they would scatter. As one of the Ralts would present him with a gift. For me? He saw the Ralts nod in delight. Why thank you. He smiled as he would open the gift and saw a Pokeball and a glove with a keystone. He looked at Gardevoir and realized that she wants him to be his trainer. Gardevoir, are you serious? You want me to be your trainer? Gardevoir nods and smiles as she knew him for such a long time. Plus she knew that he was the only trainer that would be suitable for battles, and in this case Mega Evolution. Back at the battlefield, Argenta looked over and knew the time has arrived to show Ash why she's the queen of the battle tower. Oh brave young Ash. Ever the bold and handsome one. You may have bested my first Pokémon, but you won't defeat my one and true ace. She pulled out her Pokeball and tosses it. Alakazam, my friend, take the stage. Her Alakazam came out of the Pokeball and it's her favorite Pokémon. The crowd gasped as they could feel the tide about to change. Ash noticed her Alakazam and knew he had to take care of it right now. Gengar used Shadow Ball. His Gengar tried, but winced as that aftermath effect did more damage than they anticipated. Argenta smirked as she didn't waste time. Young Montague fool, Alakazam, use hypnosis. Alakazam moved in quickly and in a matter of moments, put Gengar to sleep. Ash saw his Gengar asleep as he tried to wake him up. Gengar, come on buddy, wake up. Argenta had a devilish grin as she wasn't playing around this time. Sorry Ash, but this ends here. Alakazam used Shadow Ball back to back. Alakazam launched a wave of Shadow Balls and it didn't take long before they would do massive damage. Ash saw the attack and screamed. Gengar. It was hard to watch from the stands, but they knew Argenta had enough of getting pushed around and this was her message. When the dust settled, Gengar was unable to continue and Palmer would make it official. Gengar is unable to battle. Delia saw her ghostly friend wiped out as she chimed in. Did she had to go over the top on Gengar? Olympia nodded and replied. This is Argenta when she is backed into a corner. She's like a lioness and she will defend with everything she has. The question is, what Pokemon will Ash bring out? Ash returned his Gengar to his Pokeball as he smiled. Thanks Gengar, take a good rest. Argenta looked over at Ash as she smiled and asked the young trainer. So Ash, do you want to continue? Ash looked at her and smiled. More than ready to go Argenta. He pulls out a Pokeball as it appears Pikachu won't be battling. Sabrina looked at Ash and knew something was different and she thought to herself. What could he bring out to match wits with Argenta's Alakazam? Everyone was on pins and needles trying to figure out his second Pokemon. Ash smiled as he looked at Kukui. Like father, like son, right? Kukui thought it would be Incineroar. But remembered that they are in Alola. So which Pokemon of his Ash will bring out? I choose you. To be continued. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know your thoughts and reviews in the comment box. Now I will see you in the next video.